Hello, everybody, and welcome to our final conversation as an upbeat to the Cumnock Tryst, which is only a few days away now. Our first concert is a week on Thursday. And I'm delighted that I'm joined this evening by the internationally renowned baritone Roderick Williams, who will be singing at the Cumnock Tryst on Friday the 3rd of October at 7:30 p.m. in Trinity Church in Ayr Road, and he'll be joined that evening by the Carducci Quartet, and they'll perform his own string quartet arrangement of Schubert's heartbreaking song cycle Die schöne Müllerin. And Roddy's transformation of Schubert's lucid piano part brings a fresh perspective to the tale of the wandering miller, with its intense drama and sweeping romanticism. Schubert's passionate melodies trace a journey through unrequited love to ultimate despair. And so this is a rare opportunity at Cumnock to hear familiar music reimagined. So, welcome, Roddy. Before we get into talking about the music and your music making, I thought it might be quite interesting to kick off with, because I think our listeners will be interested to know this, just exactly what have you been up to recently, really just in the last few days and weeks and so on?
Actually managing to escape on holiday for a couple of weeks with my wife. After a prom, as soon as the prom was finished, we hightailed it, went to the south of France. We came back just in time to turn around to go to Japan for a performance of the Britain War Requiem in Hiroshima. It was a part of the commemoration of, what would it be, 80 years and a month to the day the atomic bomb was dropped. So that was quite an extraordinary week spent there. And since I've arrived back in the UK and managed to realign myself to British summertime, there have been a few concerts and recordings and what have you. I hit the ground running, rather. And I've just had the most wonderful weekend rehearsing with the Carduccis. We did do this project a couple of years ago at the Aldeburgh Festival in Snape Maltings. And so we come back to it and put it on like an old jacket, you know, and just think, how comfortable this feels. And it was just wonderful to get back into it again.
So, Roddy, what is your backstory? Where are you from? Can you tell us a little bit about your education as a musician, who your teachers were, where you studied and so on?
I was born in Barnet in North London. And what it says in Wikipedia is to a Jamaican mother and a Welsh father, but I actually think it was my father who edited that entry. Because I think I would count us as English, but we got a good Welsh name as Williams, you know. So that's under dispute. And I was initially at the prep choir school that teaches the boys for Christchurch Cathedral choir. But I wasn't, unfortunately, good enough to get into that choir. My older brother was eventually head chorister there, but under Simon Preston. But I'm afraid to say I didn't make the grade. Yeah, it's okay. I'm not bitter. It's all fine. But I at least had that choral training that my older brother got. He would sing daily. I sang 2 or 3 services a week, so it's a little bit less pressured. But it kind of gave me an inkling of what being a professional musician might be like, which I completely forgot, because when I went to secondary school near Barnet, near where I lived, Haberdashers in Elstree, I had no pretensions about being a professional musician or a singer. I honestly didn't realise it existed as a career. And the careers people, by the time we got to 6th form, the careers people don't, generally speaking, talk about going on stage much. I applied for a choral scholarship at Morton, Oxford, and was successful and sang there for 3 years. Really enjoyed my time there, reading music or doing anything I could to avoid studying music. And had a great time there, learned a great deal, but crucially for me, observed some of my colleagues going out into this singing profession. So when I went off to become a classroom music teacher, myself at Tiffin Boys School for a few years, coming out of university and doing that, I saw some of my friends go off and do this music career thing. And eventually my wife and I, we were married quite young. My wife and I had a conversation one Sunday, and she kind of said to me, what actually is your ambition? What do you want to do? And I said, kind of without thinking, I'd quite like to try this music thing and try being a singer. So I went to the Guildhall School of Music in London to study in the opera course. And fast forward just a few years, and here I am.
Mm. And Roddy, as well as being an internationally renowned singer, you're also a composer. And I've heard some of your music in programmes recently, alongside some of my own music. I wonder if you could tell us something about this parallel career, this parallel vocation of yours.
Well, yeah. Excuse me if I blush a bit, because this is a slightly awkward point for me, because I have tremendous trouble describing myself as a composer. I would describe myself as a singer or a musician. I'm happy with that. I'm a musician, someone who composes a bit. I mean, in this company, I find it very, very awkward because, amongst professional composers, I feel just a tiny bit of a fraud. And I was just in the company of the lovely Freya Whaley Cohen just a few days ago. I was singing a piece of hers, and we were discussing this because she was saying to me, Roddy, I understand you have a bit of a problem with this word composer, and we talked about that a little bit, and I was learning from her. She is a full-time composer, and it's taken her some time to be able to shed the other things in her life that were kind of keeping her from full-time composing. And now she's done that, and that's where her focus lies. And I have the most tremendous, sorry, Jimmy, this is all coming at you, but I have the most tremendous respect for people who understand what it is to be a full-time composer. And I find, I find myself to be more of, what would I say, an artisan composer. So in the gaps between my singing, so on long train journeys and what have you, I doodle. And the thing is, the honest truth is that people, myself included, people perform my doodling. And I have to say, some of them are such wonderful musicians. They can make my doodles sound really quite spectacular. And I know many wonderful composers who struggle so hard to get performances of their work. It's one thing to write, it's quite another thing to get a singer, even chamber musicians, a symphony orchestra to play your stuff and then play it again. I don't know if any of this is striking a chord, but so I kind of have leapt the queue slightly by performing my own stuff. I have drawers full of submissions from composers who've sent me stuff. There's not time in my lifetime to sing and program all their music. And I feel so much for them, but of course I jumped that queue by putting it on the program myself. So yeah, that's how I got there. That's the truth.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of choral pieces I heard of yours. In fact, one of them involved the King Singers quite recently at the Edinburgh Festival, and Colin Curry.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
program. And a wonderful event it was. And I think it's not the first piece you've written for the King Singers, is that right?
Well, no, it isn't the first one. The first one I wrote for them was for the Chapter House Choir at York, plus a community youth choir, and them to perform. And then you and I had a piece on the disc in which they were reimagining music by Thomas Wilkes and was it William Byrd, or was it?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Because I think that was the piece that you wrote, which was which had sort of I can't think of a better way of saying that, sort of come out from an existing piece. So and this is what I did to an anthem of Thomas Wilkes as well, and they were in the same concert with the fretwork, the viol consort. So the piece that you heard just now at Edinburgh that Colin was playing was actually Colin playing a transcription reduction of that viol consort piece. 5 independent viol parts. Of course, viols have that way of being able to double stop more easily than many string instruments because the bridge is flat. So the viols themselves were playing many notes, often sort of semi-polyphonically. And then Colin, with four sticks, was replicating that entire texture. He was quite a magician, I have to say. That was quite something. Yeah.
How would you describe your style, your compositional style?
Something of a magpie in one sense, and another, a chameleon is the other. A magpie chameleon, or a chameleon magpie. It is surely true that all composers have absorbed what is around them and retold that experience in their own way. And in doing so, some of the most profound composers have found a dominant voice, their own voice, and taken that forward. So that when you hear a piece of music on theirs, you turn the radio and you hear a piece of music, you say, I know who wrote that. Okay, so for example, Your Good Self. I just say that in passing. My music's less like that because I'm performing so much music over such a wide range of genre and over a wide range of centuries that I tend to I tend to wear different composers again like suits, and it's one step above plagiarism. What I am doing is I'm processing what I've been immersed in most recently. Initially, I found when people, when I was much, much younger and people listened to a piece I'd written, and they would come to me after and said, "Oh, well done, Roddy, that sounded just like second-rate Copeland," or no, that sounded just like Benjamin Britten, that sounded just like Vaughan Williams, whatever. I was initially quite stung by that, but I realised in retrospect that they were trying to find a frame of reference from something they knew to describe what they'd heard of mine. And I began to realise that they weren't criticising me; they were just trying to categorise me in a sense. And I realised, especially when it came to studying the three great Schubert song cycles, so Müllerin that I'm bringing up to you, and Winterreise, and then Schwanengesang. I had a period of about 10 years ago where I was studying all three in depth, basically one a year, and then presenting them all around the country in concert. And as I was spending so much time in their company, naturally this began to inspire me to explore them from the inside out. So there were several compositions during that time for all sorts of different combinations of instruments, chamber music and vocal as well. All sorts of different pieces in which I absolutely explored pieces. I would maybe put some of the Schubert right at the centre and then go off at a tangent. And if you ever come across Ian Bostrich's book, his obsessional book about Winterreise, it describes how when he's performing, his mind is going off at different tangents with each song. And so he eventually wrote that book. Well, I have done the same in music. I sort of present something and think, you know what this reminds me of? It makes me think in this direction. So that's how I've come to terms with that maverick style of music, picking and choosing.
Mm-hmm. And so about Die Schöne Müllerin, we have a wonderful audience at Cumnock Tryst. Some people will come to these concerts and they'll know the music quite intimately. In fact, a couple of our recent singing recitals have drawn a dedicated song recital audience, as it were, who knew their repertoire. But there are lots of people who will come not knowing what the music is, and maybe will never have heard Die Schöne Müllerin before. So, to those people, who was Die Schöne Müllerin?
Well, isn't it funny when a song cycle, so the Fair Maid of the Mill, when a song cycle is dedicated with a title character, is put up on a pedestal, actually the entire song cycle is narrated from the point of view of the miller. So you could argue that the song cycle should be called Der Müller rather than Die Schöne Müllerin. It's all about her, but it's about my reactions as a young adolescent, first of all, striding out away from home, saying, I've got to go and find my future somewhere else, and immediately finding another mill. So not that different from the mill I left, to be fair, but I find another mill, and this one's got this lovely young girl, this lovely teenage daughter, as part of the household, and I settled in that household and become obsessed with her, and obsessed with the idea that she's in love with me, which she might be, or she might not be. It's very difficult to tell. And spoiler alert: the song cycle doesn't necessarily end that well for me as the Miller boy, but what I love so much about this story is that it's wonderfully adolescent. I'm either in a white heat of excitement or an absolute trough of despair. And as you get older, you get to sort of deal more in grey, and the grey area in the middle go, oh, well, it's a little bit of this, but it's not so, don't be so quick, because there's other ways of looking at things, not for this young lad, not for me in this age. It's all or nothing. And I had the feeling that no one else on the planet has ever felt as deeply as I have felt. I have to say, Jimmy, I find it so intoxicating to be in this world. I love it. I really love it.
Does it take you back to your own teenage years?
It does for most of the story. Yes. I think to say inept, that would be a good way to describe my own sort of uselessness. In fact, the first time I performed this piece was at Sheffield in the Round. For reasons beyond my control, I was asked to do a performance of it before I was ready. So I couldn't do it from memory, so I had the book in my hand, and I explained to the audience, look, I'm going to read this to you, basically like a novel. I'll read it to you, and we'll go on this journey together. But along the way, in between several of the songs, I told the audience stories of my own teenage ineptitudes that were kind of inspired by where we were in the story at that time. So it was really linking it to my upbringing in Barnet and not that very far beyond, a little bit of my student days in Oxford. It was very confessional. I told the audience stuff that night that I hadn't even told my wife before. And Ian Burnside, who was playing the piano on that occasion, I remember seeing the eyebrows just rising off the top of his forehead. There was a bit of oversharing going on. But you know what? There wasn't a single person in that audience who didn't have a similar story of their own and a similar sort of flush of embarrassment, thinking, yeah, you know what? I did something as stupid as that when I was a child. So, yeah.
And you've made this special arrangement of the songs for yourself and for the Carducci String Quartet. Could you tell us something about how you intervened with this music as the composer, the arranger that you are? And what does this new sound context bring to the songs?
Well, the first thing for me to say is that there was never any lack of texture and colour in the piano part. So it's not as if I was at any point thinking, gosh, I think I could just do with a bit more support here, a bit more, there's a bit more texture that I could find somewhere else. It was never that. Actually, the exercise was born out of a realization that Schubert's part writing, even in his piano parts, is both quite string-like and quite choral at the same time. So I can if I look at some of his piano parts, actually, to be fair, a little bit more Infanterizer than Millerin, I can see where the tenors would be singing and where the basses would be singing, where the altos are. It maps itself out quite clearly. In Millerin more than Winterreise, it seems to lend itself to a string arrangement fairly simply, so I didn't have to intervene too much. In fact, where the piano part lies, especially in my slightly lower transpositions for baritone, where the piano part lies, it means that the cello and the viola and the second violin have a lot to do all evening, and that the only thing that's missing is something for the first violin, the prima donna, to do. So where I've stepped in as a composer more often than not is to provide counter melodies at those moments where I hope Schubert wouldn't mind too much, so that I can then sing kind of alongside. I can duet with, if you will, the spirit of the Fair Maid. The Fair Maid, incidentally, has, over the course of the evening, 4 or 5 lines, things she says in passing. Like, for example, I think it's going to rain, I'm going indoors. Other great love confessions like that. And so in this string quartet arrangement, it may well be that wordlessly she's more present than otherwise. And other than that, I've tried to keep the string textures. They're all textures I'm sure that Schubert would recognise and that I found in others of his string quartets. So there won't be any Bartok pitzing or collineum with the bow upside down on the strings, or other effects that you would find more in Kurtag than you would in Schubert. So and that's big, not really because I was trying to limit myself, but just because I thought it wasn't necessary. So I've tried to keep Roderick Williams out of it as much as possible, so that it doesn't distract people. People who know the cycle well, I'm sure, will hear things and go, well, that's not in the original. So, Pace, but hopefully it won't distract from the story. The main thing is the story. And I hope everybody, whether you know the piece like the back of your hand, whether you're hearing it from the first time, I hope everybody is swept along by the story.
Mm-hmm. And Roddy, we've worked together quite a bit on a number of my own works, and we're performing again quite soon. You're doing my Christmas oratorio again in London on the 19th of December with the BBC Symphony Orchestra and Chorus, and with the wonderful Welsh soprano Rhian Lois. Do you perform a lot of contemporary music?
Well, yes, I guess so. I think partly because I write as well. I don't know if it's a chicken or egg thing here, but partly because I write. When a new score comes my way, I like to think that I can try and climb inside the mind of the composer to a certain extent, and see what's on the page and understand why they've written it this way and not that way. The result of that, when I first started singing any contemporary music, is that whatever success I had with in those early days bred the next concert. Once a conductor or an orchestra or promoter begins to understand that not only are you not completely intimidated by contemporary music, but actually you seem to enjoy it, they will rub their hands together and say, "Oh, great! Let's get in for the next one." Some people have made entire careers out of just that. I think I count myself as being very fortunate in that I've managed to combine my enjoyment of that with my enjoyment of singing Baroque music and classical music and romantic music. Are there any sorts of other music I've forgotten? So I enjoy singing the range of it. I enjoy singing chamber music, and I enjoy the being part of the bigger symphonic expression. And one of the great joys for me, for example, in the Christmas oratorio, is that I get to sit right in the middle of the orchestra. I mean, right beside you as the conductor. I get to sit to one side of you, and experience a great deal of the piece that I'm not in. And in those moments, I've got my antenna on, and I'm listening to the orchestration and the sounds and the choral scoring, and I'm like a kid in a sweet shop. And of course, I absorb it. I mean, I don't know if you feel you want to issue a writ against me, but some of your scoring of the movements, and you remember there's that beautiful moment for the Celeste towards the end of the oratorio, and your use of percussion there kind of just had me thinking, oh, right, you can do that, right. And I started incorporating, I can't remember what it was, but I started incorporating that sound in the next thing I wrote. So you see, I was even processing the experience of performing your music into something that I was writing next. So, sorry.
No problem. I'm delighted to hear it.
How we learn, though. That's how one learns, though.
Yeah. I'm so looking forward to this. I remember we did it in Scotland a few years ago, and you recorded it, of course, with Mark Elder and the LPO.
Yes.
Even before that, and a wonderful recording it is. Now that we've done it a couple of times, and we've the other piece of mine you sung wonderfully recently was Fiat Lux. You did the UK premiere of that with me in London about a year ago or something, and we seem to be working well together. And the fact that Rian is joining us again is a tremendous dramatic soprano. I'm really excited about this whole project. I just before we come on tonight, Roderick, I was sitting in my living room listening to Radio 3, and you were announced as just about to sing "The Dream of Gerontius," and I get the fright of my life. Have we got this wrong? Have we double booked him or something? But it wasn't live. Gerontius' performance was a few days before.
Yes, indeed. It does remind me, incidentally, of a wonderful Zoom session we had where we were speaking to a wonderful world-renowned tenor from his dressing room in Germany. And we had a wonderful meeting, and there were lots of guests on, and it was a great a session. But he forgot to switch off his camera and went off to change to get into the shower. He was a man of considerable size, and we were all treated to a little back shot of him stripping off as he. Anyway, so I'm just going to stay here for now, I think. Yeah.
That's great. And this will be your first time in Cumnock, first time in Ayrshire, is that right, when you join us next week?
Yes, indeed. I've not sung in Ayrshire before. In fact, I've got some wonderful friends who live in Ayr itself, who I visited just recently. They moved up there some years ago. I shall be twisting their arm. They've probably got their tickets already, but I'll twist their arm. But I've not sung there before. I did take part in a wonderful Scottish Opera go-round tour of La Bohème. This would be 1995 when my first child was born. So I have been to the north, south and east and west of Scotland, the Highlands, and some of, not all of the islands, a wonderful a trip up to Kirkwall. So I feel I know my way around the geography, but this is my first time with you here at Cumnock Tryst.
Yeah, and we're so looking forward to it.
I will add to that I'm going to make a quick foray up to Scotland at the end of this week to sing the Schubert in a place that I'm told is pronounced Milgai.
Yep.
But I was very happy to ask the locals, could you please tell me the train to Milgavie, please? And I would have seen how far I got,
Yes.
But, yeah.
So you've got a child that was born in 1995, meaning that son, daughter is 30 years old. How is that possible? It doesn't look possible for you to have a child that age.
You're a very kind man, and I'm glad this is recorded. Thank you very much. Write that down, somebody, please. Yes, I have a very significant and rather large round birthday coming up before the end of the year. When I see you next for the after the Schubert, I mean to say, when I see you for the Christmas oratorio, I shall be significantly older. I might have a Zimmer frame by then. I'm working on it anyway. But yeah, I can't say that birthday is filling me with joy, but I'm sure I'll cope. So yeah.
Feels my eldest was married a few months ago. She was born in 1990, and I felt very old that day. Well, Roderick, thank you so much for this. We're so excited about you joining us at the Cumnock Tryst. As I say, just in a few days' time. We'll get this out and about, and I'll alert our wider audience of your arrival in Cumnock. We are delighted to host you, and we will make you feel very much at home. We'll give you a hearty Cumnock welcome when you arrive. So, Roderick Williams, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you.